All right, welcome, folks. So you and I are both jet lagged, so we're going to be asleep during this thing. So you're going to have to handle the whole thing.
Ready?
You seem very energized.
So SMEs, you basically have to. Let's define that first. Let's define what an SME is and what it means to build for an SME. So why don't you go first, Kathryn?
I think we've talked to my last company, Cabbage. We sold to American Express in 2020, and we serve small businesses, about 500,000 of them in the US. And we always define them by size, how many employees they had. And in the US, and this is a US stat, but there are 32 million small businesses in the US. 26 million of them don't have employees. Of the remaining 6, 90% have fewer than 20 employees and 80% have fewer than 10. And so we built our products to support businesses that had fewer employees because that was most of the businesses that drove the economy.
Yeah, I mean, we never really put a marker around it other than to say that we deal with a lot of businesses selling online for the first time, even if they themselves aren't small. And what you saw during the pandemic was so many people had to pivot business models. So if you were a restaurant chain and you were doing for the very first time click and collect, you became kind of a new to online business. So and we also started the micro segment and it kind of moved up over time. And in Europe, you get a lot more really small businesses that kind of stay small, local shops, local domestic only businesses. So.
What's the sales cycle like for those folks? Is it like somebody buys a cash register and has a point of sale installed? How do you activate those folks? How do you access the folks who have small businesses like that?
We were really lucky because we were providing working capital to small businesses, and there's nothing easier to sell than money. So from our perspective, customers were willing to share data with us that we could use to make an instant decision and give them instant access to capital, and that was really valuable to them. So that our sales were made so much easier just because of the product.
So you just said, here's money?
Well, of course, they had to give us some data. We had to make a decision.
Okay.
But yes, it was different than selling payments. We moved that direction. We felt like we were moving toward the other products over time, but we started with lending.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the mission critical infrastructure, but I think there's been a big focus over the last few years on intelligent bundling for small businesses. So it makes little sense for a really small company to go to 18 different places to get an accounting software, some version of an ERP or business management software, a bank account, a commerce software to host a web shop, and then a payment processor. So what you see, we distribute a lot through partnerships, and most of the people have figured out that if you integrate everything intelligently, even if they're separate businesses providing the service, if it works kind of as an out-of-the-box bundle, people are happy to buy it that way.
So it should be sort of a package deal as opposed to just one-off pieces, right?
That's what we found over time. We started with lending, but began to build other products. We had a hard time serving businesses that were just starting because there was no data to use to underwrite them, and we realized we should be offering them a bank account, because that's one of the first things a business owner does when they move into or begin a small business. So we launched a checking account product. In the US, people still write checks. I know that sounds crazy, but it's a thing.
Where are some holes in the market right now when it comes to SMEs? Where are some products that people should be building?
I mean, there's friction everywhere, right? Typically starts from the very moment you go to incorporate a company, you're already dealing with some level of admin and burden. For us, we try to go as far back as possible in how we think about where to get access to customers. The next thing, for example, we want to do is opening a bank account, a business bank account. First of all, in Europe, it's fee paying in almost every geography, and in some cases significant. It's $200 a year to have a business account in the Netherlands, still for the most part. And then it's just the getting all of the package together, the friction in onboarding. There's a lot of anti-money laundering, KYC. A small business doesn't think about these things. They just say, I have a product and I want to sell it. So businesses like ours we're all tackling the same problem, which is trying to get the friction out. If you're a super large business, you don't have difficulty, right? Getting a line of credit. You can pick from people are calling you to offer you services. Mm-hmm. So we still have a lot of businesses that get turned down or have to go to 3 or 4 places to find the ideal solution.
And if you're a big business, you have a CFO. And most small businesses don't have that luxury. They don't have a controller. They maybe have a bookkeeper or an external accountant. But most small business owners are running the books, running their finances themselves, and they need something that makes it easier for them.
Yeah, I mean, the payments team that Netflix has is bigger than my entire company. But for a small business, the guy's the treasurer, the janitor, and also the head of payments.
if we're coding something, if we're building a tool for small businesses, what are some of the best practices? Obviously, if you're going for scale, you gotta put it on AWS, and you gotta do all kinds of server stuff. What do the small businesses need in terms of hardware, software, support, that sort of thing? Just so if anybody out there is thinking about this, they can take that back with them.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, we always say we're trying to push the enterprise-grade technology as far down market as we can and do it in an economical way. I think, surprisingly, every business, especially one that sells online, to full availability, you need 100% uptime. You need something that's really robust and stable. Typically, we do a lot of hosting of the checkout. So, there isn't a person in a small business who thinks about optimizing the checkout flow and a beautifully designed page. So that's something that we have to do for them. And that's typically the one area where I think we can add a lot of value, because if you go on a really small website, you tend to get a really clunky customer experience. You don't get a one-click purchase experience. You don't have Amazon obsessing over making sure that you know exactly which button to click on, fill out as little data as possible. So we kind of abstract that complexity away for the business.
The experience definitely needs to save them time. And that's the one commodity that's always in short supply if you're a business owner. So the user experience should, be really simple, easy to use, and not take a lot of time.
Can you think of a client that changed the way you thought about the startup you were building? It's a little out there, but it might be interesting to hear.
Yeah, look, I think during the pandemic, a bunch of new business models spun up. So, again, in the U.S., I think food delivery and drive-through is way more common. But, in Europe, the idea that you would sort of scan and pay it at the table, that's actually a really sort of brand new business concept. And, people just went anti-cash overnight. So you had all sorts of businesses replacing cash with electronic payments, and whether that's kind of consumer accounts or wallets. So we had a number of companies saying, this used to be the way I run my business. Now it needs to work like this. Can you give me a payment solution that is viable for that use case?
It sounds like it would drive Germans crazy. They liked everything has to be cash, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's contactless and various other things over time have really eliminated the need, but I mean, nobody wanted to touch the stuff in the middle of the pandemic, so everybody was looking for a way to introduce an electronic payment flow.
We started our business in 2008, and we were serving eBay businesses. eBay small businesses sparked the idea for our company Cabbage in the first place. And so we got really fortunate because we used real-time access to third-party data, which was eBay and PayPal data, which is some of the best data you can get, because you had the transaction level, SKU level data with eBay, and you had the payment data with PayPal. And so customers were willing to share that data with us. Investors were skeptical that they would do it, but it turns out people will share information with you if it means you're going to get access to capital. And what that did for us is those eBay businesses that we met in person going to these eBay events, they led us to require that all of our customers shared real-time data with us via third parties, and that changed the trajectory of our business, and it helped us weather, changes in the market and changes in our customer dynamic.
What are some misconceptions about small businesces?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people look at large companies and think that they were born with 500 million in turnover. I mean, probably the biggest misconception is certain number of small businesses are going to turn into large businesses, and companies like ours can play a role in whether they sink or swim in some respect, or that they can sell profitably or get to profitability or get to global expansion or whatever. I think the other one is, sophistication varies. I can name some really dumb enterprise customers. I can name some really smart small businesses. Some people have a background in e-commerce or payments or technology. Some people are on their third or fourth business venture, and they really have a really good idea of what they want. So we try to treat them all as though they were sophisticated buyers, and if not, we help them fill in the gaps.
I think a misconception is around how they manage cash flow and what they have access to. Even if they have high turnover, they may not get access to it when you think they need to. So construction businesses are a great example. They may go and bid a job, buy the supplies, get the people to do the work, and do the work. They may not get paid for 60 days. So even though it's a high turnover, from a capital perspective, they're generating a lot of revenue. They don't have access to that revenue, and they need working capital in the interim period to fund the work in order to get the next big job.
Yeah, you think a bank would have a really good idea on a merchant's creditworthiness, but I think as Kathryn already alluded, especially if you're in the payment flow and you see patterns of recurring sales or future sales and the business model is predictable, we think we have a really good view on creditworthiness. So that allows you to make a decision way faster and also just to bundle the product differently.
It's actually an interesting point. So I mean, from a Kabbage standpoint, you guys were giving people cash, so they basically had cash in their bank accounts. But how do you sell into a organization that may have, I don't know, again, will pay in 60 days, or they're having payroll issues, or they're not able to sell because it's rainy outside? You basically have these microeconomic issues that come up. How do you sell into those companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think every capital or working capital product is a little bit different around the margins, but for us, we have a flexible repayment option where you can design when you want to pay us back, which takes into account peaks and troughs and selling and so on and so forth, and that forms a little bit of the basis of our offer too. There's quite a lot of data you get, and you got to be fairly intelligent in how you do it. And it's a misconception about what people would use the working capital for. It's typically to deal with peak demand in our case, so they want to order more stock. In some cases, people have to turn away business because they need to wait for a full cycle to go in and stock inventory. So that's an interesting use case.
We deployed over $15 billion to small businesses over the course of the 10 years. And what we found, I think, was that small businesses were always in distress. So we were always asked when we were raising debt, well, what are you going to do in a downturn? How are you going to handle, a global macroeconomic challenge? And we said, well, we actually know what a distressed business looks like because we see it all the time. Because businesses are strapped for cash and they do have cash flow challenges. And so if you don't have more data about a business, it's really hard to serve them. And if you can see what happened for the last year, you can predict what's going to happen for the next year. If you only see what happens in March and it's a down month, you might not support that business when actually it turns out September through January are amazing.
So to some final thoughts, let's talk a little bit about marketing into small businesses. We built a product that was supposed to market, it was a market for small businesses. And our biggest issue was that you called the place and the manager wasn't there, or the manager was making a macchiato and didn't have any time to talk to you. What are some of the best ways to access those folks?
We were digital marketing.
Yeah.
We were born, in that age, and so we didn't have a lot of, salespeople calling people up on the phone, at least out of the gate. My co-founder Rob always said there are 1,000 shitty ways to acquire a small business customer, and you have to be good at all of them. So we literally tried everything. As Mollie, we loved partnerships. They were good. Radio turned out to be a really amazing market, but we had to test it. You just have to keep trying and figure out when it hits.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also some publicly referenceable sites that businesses tend to go to. I mean, Trustpilot, so people will kind of check you out and your presence and even your social media presence. How do you handle complaints and things like that? So we also do a lot of digital marketing, but to be honest, probably the most effective route to market for us is just distribution partnerships. People that are buying other software that needs to work with payments, they want something out of the box. There may be 300 integrations of something that we have, and those all funnel customers our way.
Was there a specific call to action that you really liked that you saw worked really well for? I mean, you kind of got lucky, right? You're giving away money, but was there a call to action? What did the radio spots sound like?
We were pretty irreverent, I would say, in our marketing. So we found that our customers responded to that. We, produced silly YouTube videos that they loved. We tried to not take ourselves too seriously because, everybody needs a little break, a little time to laugh and to realize that, the people who are serving them are real people, just like they're real businesses, run by real people. So we found that being honest and real about being human was the best way.
Yeah, I'm a little lucky. Payments is mission critical infrastructure. Everybody needs it. If you want to take a payment, you need a payment provider. And everyone's convinced that their payment provider is doing a poor job or ripping them off to some degree. So you can always get the conversation started on the basis that there's probably something they don't know. And it's kind of free to ask questions, and you can have a dialogue without a big commitment on the customer side. And so we get a lot of people willing to speak to us. And then in the end, you just need to say, establish the pain point. Is the checkout crap? Are the fees too high? You know, does anyone pick up the phone when you call? Typically, SMEs get such bad service that any service is already considered somewhat of a differentiator.
Yeah, you're right. You have to be available for your customers because they may not need to talk to you, but they'll call just to see if you'll answer the phone.
What do you guys think about the cannabis industry, the up and coming? I mean, we're from the States, you're in Amsterdam, so you don't really care, but do you think there's going to be a lot of space there for services?
Look, I'm fond of saying that web is always creating new categories. You know, when I first started in the payments business, taxi cabs took cash and there was no Uber, right? Netflix was a DVD business. So, I mean, there's always going to be a new use case for something that can be bought, sold, fulfilled online. You know, as with any, let's call it regulated industry, whether it's gambling or even, you know, crypto licensing, which is getting very common now in most European countries.
That's a good point.
As long as the rules of the game are well understood and people know what puts a business in good standing and whose responsibility it is to take care of the difference between local law or pan-European law. Like, you know, we want to support all entrepreneurs of all legal businesses, right? It's just a different bar you have to clear depending on how difficult the topic is.
In the US, you know, there's this misconception that banks don't want to serve cannabis businesses, but they do. Have you ever met a bank that didn't want to take deposits and didn't want to provide services to a legitimate business? It's a matter of the bureaucracy, you know, not being able to keep up with, you know, the times and with, you know, what's a legal business today.
Do incumbent players take that business when it's available, or should startups try to grab that business?
I mean, in Europe, 80% of the payments are still processed by banks. Most people would describe the risk attitude of the average bank as being cautious to extremely cautious, even on, you know, very now mature industries like regulated gambling or sports betting, whatever. I mean, for some, that's just a hard no. So, yeah, we've always said that just by being willing to listen and think along. You know, I can remember a number of people that thought it was crazy that people would exchange their real money for digital currency 8 or 9 years ago, and this is now like Charles Schwab, right? There's billions moving around. So I think you get rewarded for thinking along with the customer rather than, you know, waiting for it to become totally mainstream and ignoring them until they're all massive.
I think you saw it play out post-pandemic. It's not about cannabis, but in the US anyway, and this happened in Europe too, when small businesses were polled about where they wanted to do their business, they were interested in fintechs because fintechs were there for them when times were tough, when they needed to convert to digital payments, when they needed to change the way they ran their business in order to deal with the changing times.
So like take out all that other good stuff. You basically have to look for the hole and jump into it, right?
100%.
All right, super. Well, I think we're good. Thanks for joining us. Perfect.
All right.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks.